Hi, my name is Roxanne Rose, and welcome to the first ever video on my channel. I've wanted to start making videos for a while actually, but I'd be lying if I said that sitting down and filming this whole thing and then putting it out for the world to see isn't a little intimidating. Might be awkward, might kind of suck, I don't know. So please be a little bit forgiving. Anyways, I am one of those people who hate astrology. Like, I just hate it. And I know these days that's kind of a controversial statement to make because people take this seriously. But I just can't help myself because I see things like this.
Though they are emotionally manipulative shitheads, Pisces men are always really good looking.
Aquarius just have no business being in a relationship.
I hate Pisces because you are also like Libra, spineless with no backbone.
Libra men would know that they know that you're lying, and yet will continue to lie, and that's because they're the balancing sign. And so when they're making balance in the world, but yet they're the ones causing the imbalance, they will continue to lie and gaslight to make it seem like that they're not the ones that.
The main reason I feel strongly about it is that basically I see astrology as one more thing humans have made up to judge one another based on things that we really can't control. It bothers me sometimes when I tell people I'm and then I sit down and it's like I'm watching these wheels turning in their head as they're trying to figure out, does that mean she's this person and this and this? And they've known me for like under 30 minutes. It bothers me. And yes, I did bleep out the name of my star sign. There is no way that I'm telling people so that they can go leave a comment like, of course would make this video. But it's not even just about me. From my own mental health journey, learning to kind of observe people as they are rather than assuming things about them based on these surface level characteristics has made me hopefully a better person and certainly a happier one. But I also think I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here because the truth is when it comes specifically to people who love astrology, I'm very judgmental. So in this video, I'm actually going to try to put that annoyance and that judgment aside for a little bit because I do want to understand why this belief is taking off the way it is in this particular moment. And then when I'm done, I will make what I hope is a rational argument against it because I do think that if taken too seriously, it can be potentially bad for your mental health. Clearly, astrology is huge right now. A simple search of the astrology hashtag on TikTok will show you that it's been viewed 64.5 billion times. According to a poll conducted by research firm Yougov, about 1 in 4 Americans believes in astrology. What's especially interesting is that women are more likely to believe in it than men, and that among young people, the belief is especially high, with something like 37% of people under 30 believing in it. So keep those two groups of people in mind because we're going to get back to that. Another thing to consider. When it comes to any type of pseudoscience, there is usually a lot of money to be made off of you believing. According to a report from Allied Market Research, the astrology market was worth $12.8 billion in 2021. Another report from MarketWatch valued the astrology app market alone at $2,576.09 million in 2022. And I think it's important to keep these things in mind before you spend all that money that you worked real hard for on this. I think the fact that this industry is really lucrative is definitely part of the reason it's taken off the way that it has. It definitely explains why marketers are so interested in getting involved. What I don't think it explains is why the market was there in the first place and why there is such a big demand. And I think to answer that question, we have to look at what's going on in the world. And what's going on in the world is complete chaos, babe. So this is actually not the first time that belief in astrology has surged in response to chaos. A study published in this journal with a really long name that I can't say without looking at my script, the Journal for the Society for Personality and Social Psychology. But anyway, this study that was published in 1982 basically looked at the amount of superstitious articles published in Germany in the period between World War I and World War II. So basically this was between 1918 and 1940, and that was a notoriously chaotic time in Germany. They had just went through a horrific international conflict. They were in a recession that was so severe that their money was basically worthless. Like people would literally use money as wallpaper because it was so valueless. And they had some very problematic political leadership. So these two researchers looked at periodical indexes from the time, which basically means that they were just looking at bunches of printed media like newspapers and magazines. And they were specifically looking for articles published about 3 particular types of superstitious beliefs: astrology, mysticism, and cults. They then compared the number of these articles published to what they considered the threat at the time. And they measured threat by looking at the level of unemployment, wages, and the level of industrial production. And what they found is that for 2 of those 3 types of superstitious beliefs, when the level of threat increased, there was also an increase in the number of articles published about superstition. And during the pandemic, another study was done, and these researchers found a positive correlation between superstitious beliefs and a fear of COVID. What that means is that among participants in the study, the ones who were more likely to have higher levels of superstition were also more afraid of COVID. So one thing that's important to remember, correlation does not equal causation. So correlation means that as one thing increases, another increases simultaneously. But that doesn't always mean that one thing is causing the other thing to increase, but it is still interesting information. So these studies I referenced, I think can help us kind of piece together why astrology is so big in this particular moment. What they don't really answer is why it's so big among young people and young women in particular. To be honest, I had kind of a hard time finding solid research to answer that question, but I do have a few armchair theories. So with young people in general, there's been a clear trend away from organized religion. Surveys both in the US and worldwide show that the number of young people who are religiously affiliated is decreasing. Millennials are less likely to be religious than previous generations, and Gen Z is even less likely to be religious than millennials. But while religious affiliation is decreasing, spirituality really isn't going anywhere. It's kind of staying solid. So while millennials are less likely than older generations to be religious, they are now less likely to be spiritual. In all likelihood, to some degree, as young people turn away from organized religion, they turn to other spiritual beliefs like astrology to help fill that void. And another important thing to remember is that young people are just still figuring themselves out. Adolescence and early adulthood is generally when identity formation occurs, with most psychologists estimating this to happen between about 12 to 22 years of age. So during this confusing time, I think that having this kind of ready-made identity handed right to you can be really appealing. I think the gender question is going to be a little bit harder to answer. I do want to preface by saying right off the bat, it's not because women are less intelligent, it's not because women are less rational. I wish I didn't have to include that disclaimer, but unfortunately, in any online discussion of gender differences of any kind, things can get really goofy really quickly. I want to move away from goofiness and stay on the same page factually. There really isn't a simple answer to this question. My best guess is that this has something to do with mental health. Women are twice as likely to be diagnosed with depression as men, twice as likely to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder as men, and 1.6 times as likely to be diagnosed with OCD. That last bit is especially interesting because when I was doing research for this video, I actually found like a number of studies correlating OCD to superstitious beliefs. Now, I'm not a mental health professional, so I really can't say for sure exactly what this connection is, but I actually have dealt with all three of these diagnoses myself. And I do know that for me, when my symptoms are at their worst is when I'm in some kind of a situation that for whatever reason, I just feel kind of powerless to remove myself from. Something like being stuck in a job I hate, being stuck in a living situation I'm uncomfortable with. That's really gonna like send me spiraling. The research I discussed earlier, combined with my own anecdotal experiences, makes me think that as people do worse mentally and feel less in control, they turn to astrology to give them some of the answers that maybe they're not coming up with themselves. And nowadays, a lot of people, especially women and especially young women, are feeling that way. So right now, young women and teen girls' mental health has reached an absolute crisis point. The statistics on what teen girls especially are going through right now are pretty horrific. In 2021, nearly 60% of teen girls reported feeling persistently sad or hopeless. That's like most of them. That's the majority. That's most teen girls that feel depressed pretty much all of the time. And the report from the CDC that discusses these findings is pretty dark. I don't want to talk about it in too much more detail here because like I said, this is still my first video. I'm still trying to figure out what will or won't get me in trouble with the algorithm gods, but I will link it down below because I do think that it is well worth a read. And I think when people start to get into this headspace and they're looking for someone to give them answers, astrologers coming in with fancy charts that are basically saying, just tell me your birthday and I'll lay out your whole life for you, are probably very reassuring, and they're also giving off this air of confidence. Like when you look at some of these astrology charts, it looks so scientific, it looks so real. It's not, but it looks like it is. So mental health is probably a big part of the equation, but I do think that the answer is a little more nuanced than just mental health alone. I think it's worth mentioning an article from The Atlantic called Who Gets to Look Out to the Edge of the Universe. This article discusses the Hubble Space Telescope, which is this super powerful telescope operated by NASA that's able to capture these incredible detailed images of the universe, like this one and this one and these ones. To look through the Hubble Space Telescope, researchers have to submit a proposal for review by a committee. But in 2014, the committee noticed that proposals submitted by a male researcher were significantly more likely to be approved than those submitted by a female. Sexism has been a long-standing issue in scientific fields, and women are very underrepresented when it comes to wellness, another industry that is notoriously pseudoscientific. There's a lot of discussion about how women's negative experiences in the medical system and their inability to get treatment for chronic, long-standing conditions pushes them towards the wellness industry as they begin to look for answers elsewhere. And this makes me wonder if there's a similar parallel where sexism in scientific fields makes women feel less comfortable there and feel less confident in learning about topics like astronomy. With all that being said, I did find a study saying that men are more likely to believe in COVID conspiracy theories, which is also pseudoscience, so I don't think that the sexism in the sciences argument is the full explanation. So I've also seen some arguments saying that astrology is more appealing to men because astrology is relational. It's like discussing relationships and things like that, and women are basically socialized to be more relational than men. But I would actually counter that argument by pointing out that a lot of this type of alpha, sigma, etc. male content, which people basically call astrology for men, is really just talking about how men relate to women. I actually think a part of astrology's appeal to women may simply be about aesthetics. Things like these sparkly star charts and these cute little symbols. It's a more stereotypically feminine aesthetic. I think that girls and women are naturally going to be drawn to it. Marketers are also going to be drawn to it because they know that they can kind of take advantage of it to sell you even more candles and crystals and eyeshadow palette. But like I said before, I don't think that there's really one definitive answer to this question. I think that whatever the answer is, it may be some combination of all of these things, and it may be none of these things and something I've missed entirely, and it may be a complete coincidence. So I've done my best to thoroughly research and fact check all these sources to figure out why people believe in astrology. It took me ages, but I did it. But now I want to switch back to my opinions, because I do think that astrology actually has the potential to be harmful. So I have no proof for any of this. I'm not a mental health expert. I'm kind of basing a lot of this off my own anecdotal experiences with mental health and with therapy, so I just want to make that very clear. So I don't think astrology is always bad. I know a lot of people who do it just for fun. Like, they like to look at their horoscopes. They like to ask other people what their sign is. It's just like a hobby. I think that's absolutely fine. I don't think anything is wrong with that. What worries me is these people.
You could be chilling with a Scorpio. Everything could be fine. And they're just like, that motherfucker cheated on me 6 months ago. I'm gonna go rent a car and I'm gonna go follow his ass.
Taurus men will lead you on and take advantage of you for years and then wait until the night before his secret trip to Canada to tell you that they're getting back with their ex over the fucking phone.
Don't blame me, blame your personality.
I've gone through my own mental health journey, and something that has helped me feel better is learning how to observe people rather than judge them. I was at this art museum once. I saw this blonde, very conventionally attractive looking girl, and she was taking pictures of herself in front of all the art, posing, looking cute. And I was getting worked up. I was getting mad. I was like, she is shallow. She is judgmental. She doesn't understand the art. I had to stop myself because I realized two things. Number one, I didn't know anything about this girl other than a couple of surface level facts. I know that she's pretty. I know that she dresses well. I know she probably likes Instagram. Other than that, she could be the nicest person in the world. She could be the worst, but I'll never know if I'm assuming the worst right off the bat. And the second thing I realized is that as pissed off as I was, didn't matter to her. She took her picture. She enjoyed herself. She went about her day. And the only one that walked around mad was me. And I actually had to talk about this with my therapist, because after that incident, I realized I was just going through my day with this kind of constant running internal monologue, judging people based on these assumptions I made from just seeing them. And all that was doing was hurting me. The problem with astrology is I think it encourages you to make these types of judgments, because you're sitting there and you're saying Taurus is stubborn, Pisces is overly emotional, Capricorn is problematic. Let's say you decide I hate all Capricorns, they're all problematic. You're probably going to start subconsciously treating them differently, whether you know it or not. And then they're probably not going to like you that much because you're going around calling them problematic all the time. So you are going to basically block off your ability to ever build a good relationship with the person of that group. And as a result, you're only going to reinforce that belief, because now every time you meet a Capricorn, you don't get along with them. Another issue I have with astrology is that I think it disempowers you from making your own decisions. Like I said earlier, issues like depression, like anxiety, like OCD can come with this kind of decision paralysis and this feeling of being stuck and of being powerless. And I think for me, that one thing that's really helped get me out of that loop is to start taking just these small decisions and acting on them, and to make sure that I'm not spiraling off into wondering what these decisions mean about me as a person. So for example, let's say I like someone. I'm just going to ask them out. I'm not going to worry about whether I'm doing it because somebody told me that it's a good idea for me to do it, or because I feel like I need to get out more. And I'm not going to worry about if that makes me too unfeminine. I'm just going to do it because I want to do it. And it doesn't even have to be that big of a decision. You can start with something small. If the only decision that you can make today is to say, I'm going to put my work aside for 10 minutes, I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm not going to feel bad that this makes me unproductive, then that's the only thing that you need to do. And you'll start to see, as you make these small decisions for yourself just because you want to and because it feels right for you in the moment, you start to get this practice and this comfort with it, and then you become more and more comfortable making bigger decisions as you go. And you know what? It really starts to feel good. But the problem with astrology is you basically throw your hands up in the air and you're ceding your decision-making power to the stars. You're letting someone and something else decide for you. And what you're doing then is reinforcing that narrative that you have, that you and your brain power alone are not enough to make these decisions, that you need help and you need someone to step in and do it for you. And the final reason that I think astrology might actually be bad for people's mental health is because I think that it prevents you from doing really serious self-examination. I found another example of this in this article that I read from the Washington Post. In this article, they interviewed a young woman who refused to date anyone who was a Pisces. According to this article, a girl whose name I can't pronounce, I'm sorry girl, I cannot pronounce your name, a Capricorn, became astrologically curious. I love that they use that term, astrologically curious, 7 years ago in the wake of a bad breakup with, unsurprisingly, a Pisces. Now, it would take a lot of convincing for her to get involved with a potential partner of that sun sign. So to be clear, I'm not trying to judge her. I've obviously never met her, but when I read this, it is a little hard for me not to get frustrated. Breakups are painful, and of course, you would want to repeat that pain. But to make sure that you don't fall into the same patterns in any new relationships as you did in your old one, you need to do some analysis. It takes work to figure out what went wrong and what signs you may have overlooked. You also need to look a little bit about what you might have done to contribute to the problem, because usually in a breakup, not always, but usually, there are two people at fault. But if you just look at what the person's birthday is and then you say going forward, I'm never going to date anybody with that same birthday, you take away all of that critical analysis. Instead, you set yourself up to make the same mistakes instead of learning to form healthier relationships. And then that just traps you in a cycle, because healthy, fulfilling relationships are probably the #1 most important component to good mental health. So that's about it. If you made it through all those stats and all that scientific research, congratulations on being just as much of a geek as I am, and welcome once again to my channel. I hope you enjoyed this overly in-depth analysis of an internet trend, and if you did, please be sure to hit that like button below and subscribe to this channel, because I hope to make more videos like this in the future. And that's all. I did it. I made a video.